the end of the season, it is in fact quite a busy time, because it's the time where we have to make sure that the orchard is ready for the winter. What that really entails is checking tree stakes, making sure that the tree ties are all in place. The other thing that trees will need is greasing. We are an organic orchard from day one. It's always been an organic orchard. Apart from being organic, we've tried to be machine-free, if you like.
What's the cardboard for?
It's a weed smother and a mulch, and then we'll put compost. We'll weigh it down with compost. It's to save. The grass tends to be very long and coarse along here. It's really not ideal for the trees.
Okay.
So it's just to help us get all of that under control a bit more. It's a permaculture solution.
But there's the general preparation of the orchard for the winter as well. So last turning perhaps of the compost heaps. In recent winters, the grass has continued to grow right through until December. So we could find ourselves mowing the tree circles and mowing the grass even. When we gather together in the rope makers and just enjoy a meal together and each other's company, it's an opportunity to reflect with our volunteers on what's happened during the year and to start to think about what we'd like to try and achieve in the following year. It's usually a very convivial and jolly evening, and the food in the rope makers is fantastic.
In 2006, a new local plan was developed, and St Mary's Field was nominated or named as a green space in perpetuity for the enjoyment of the community. September 2008 was when the community orchard group was formed. So we're coming up to our 10 years. So we planned this planting day in January 2009, and we had 30 different organisations involved in that, from the Sea Scouts to the Brownies to gardening groups to every sort of community group. I think about 200 people, and we planted the first 25 trees and a mixed hedge which was going to separate where the allotments were going to be from the main orchard.
January is probably one of the busiest months of the year in the orchard because it's the start of the pruning season, and hopefully we've had a nice cold spell and the trees are really dormant, and this is the time where the trees will be pruned, and it'll be over January/February when the pruning of the trees takes place. And for some people who've come along to the orchard, it's one of the opportunities for them to learn how to prune trees, and so there's a little bit of education goes on as well. Now, one of our big celebrations is the Wassailing Day. And Wassailing in the West Country is very much about orchards. And year on year, our Wassailing celebration has become bigger and bigger.
So thank you first of all for listening, and thank you second of all for coming. It's an amazing turnout in this well-cherished orchard. So first of all, give yourself a cheer for coming out on a wet, dreary day. That shows the dedication. dedication to this orchard, and the trees will be appreciating it, I can tell you that. So, as you heard from a few of the cider drinking yokels over there, if I say the word wassail, the traditional response as loud as you can is drink hail. Wassail!
Drink hail!
Wassail!
Drink hail!
Wassail! Drink hail! I can't remember that, just bark like a dog. And those of you who know your Anglo-Saxon and Old Norse will realise that wassail means be healthy. Wassail, be healthy, and that's what we're wishing the trees today, as well as to wish each other. And drink hail means drink healthy, and it's not a government guideline of alcoholic unions. It's a sense as when it's cold and dark and wet and damp, we need to go outside and drink to feel healthy. So help yourself to a good bit of juice and a good bit of cider, hopefully as well. There are many other ingredients, apart from cider being the primary one, to a good proper wassail. And the first one we need to introduce you to next is to have a wassail king and queen in order to lead the rest of the ceremony. And could you find a tree? Wassail king and queen are going to lead us with the music accompanying them until they find a tree which will become the old apple tree man for the rest of the ceremony. The basket coming up. It's the furthest one! Gathered around our chosen tree by the wassail king and queen, and this for the rest of this year will be the old apple tree man. And so we're going to direct our love and attention to this tree in representation of the rest of the orchard. And there'll be a little bit of a chance after this to go around and find your own tree to make sure all of the trees are feeling blessed and remembered in the cold of winter. So the first thing we need to do, through no fault of the trees themselves, over the kind of last month since the last wassail, there's been a gathering of malignant spirits. Could we have a... So it is our duty and in fact our responsibility to make sure all the bad spirits are cleared away from the branches of this tree and all the other trees. And we do that by a good dose of howling and of banging and of barking. 1, 2, 3. The wassail bowl, thank you Ian, who's going to pass it over to King Rob. And it's King Rob's duty now to go around the tree, traditionally in a mincing style. A good kind of sound to do this while someone's mincing is the theme tune to the Archers. So if we can do that all together while Rob minces and sprinkles. And can I just remind you that this time, could you sprinkle the cider raw rather than having passed through you? Okay, okay, right. So after 3, 1, 2, 3. Apple tree! Apple tree, apple tree! What you have given to us, we give back to you.
What you have given to us, we give back to you.
Next year may we have.
Next year may we have.
Hatfuls and capfuls.
Hatfuls and capfuls.
3 bushels bags full.
3 bushels bags full.
And little heaps of apples underneath the stairs.
And little heaps of apples underneath the stairs.
Pip, pip.
Pip, pip.
Hooray. Oh, actually, you do the hooray. Right? Pip, pip.
Hooray. Hooray.
Pip, pip.
Hooray.
It's your wassail, and it's our wassail, and a joy be to you for a jolly wassail. There's trees all in the orchard and apples on the trees. The juice it comes a-flowing when apples they get squeezed. The juice it turns to cider in barrels in the barn. And a little drop of cider won't do us any harm. And it's your wassail, and it's our wassail, and a joy be to you for a jolly wassail. Wassail!
The other role I have, I guess I had that to some extent before I was chair. On the working session days, I organise and delegate and chivvy along and all of those other things that our volunteers who come along on the days. There are around 60 volunteers. I would split those into a number of different categories. We've got our very active volunteers, of which there are now around 20. And there are the occasional volunteers, which probably around another 15 or so. At each of the monthly committee meetings, one of the things that we do is different members of the committee have different roles. So each of those people at the committee meeting, give a report, but what's become more important, rather than a retrospective report, it's a what do we need to address this month? And that for me is really invaluable, because that tells me what I need to be telling people to do from the different areas that people are guiding me with. So I really rely on the committee as a whole to guide me when I'm playing ringmaster on the working day. On that particular February working day, the other things that we do are any last final pruning that takes place. And the other thing that we will do around this time of year is we'll mow the wildflower area. And the reason we do that is it knocks back the grass and gives the wildflowers, which are just starting to emerge, a chance to get ahead of the grass. This is the time when we need to tidy up our hedges, cut those back. The hedge that was laid 3 years ago is romping away now and has become a really nice thick hedge, but needs to be cut back each year. And this is the time of year before the birds start to nest again. It's a good opportunity to clean out the nest boxes so they're nice and tidy for the birds when they start to nest again. But it also lets us know how many of them have been used and how successful they've been. Of course, one of the things the birds will be doing is any grubs and things which are on the trees and affecting the apples, they will be doing a nice job in clearing those away for us to feed their young. Now, a hibernaculum is a home for invertebrates, and where they can spend the winter. Frogs, newts, toads, beetles, all sorts of things can use it. To build a hibernaculum, stage one, dig a hole about 2 foot deep. Fill it up with miscellaneous rocks and stones and things, creating lots of little cavities in amongst them. The next thing to do is, once you've got this mound of stones, is cover it in turf. So you create a mound, so on the surface it looks like a mound. However, what you must remember to do is to leave some little tunnels. So using drain pipe or something similar, you can create little tunnels where the creatures find their way in, snuggle down for the winter in amongst all the stones and crevices and things that are under the ground there.
Pretty much that whole corner needs clearing as much as we can without taking water.
So if we want to maintain a pond, then what we need to do is thin the plants. So we had a bit of a clear out. It was quite a major clear out, this one actually, because it hadn't been done for 3 or 4 years this February. The pond itself is it is a wildlife pond. So the weeds and plants that are in there are all native plants, and anything else that is in there has actually just found its way there. So any newts, and there are a lot of newts there, and frogs, water boatmen and caddisfly, all of these other creatures that we see in there have all found their way one way or another.
Greg, is it just a palmate or a common? I forgot how you identify them. It's very difficult, I mean, particularly out of the breeding time, and whether it's male, female. They're all getting into breeding conditions. If you turn them over, you'll see there's gold underneath there. Yeah. That's a male.
That's what we've shaken out.
That's a dragonfly and some snails.
Ram's horn snails, little water spider looking there, another little trilobite-like creature, quite a few of these little bivalves.
Yeah, they're very nice colour, those little things.
So it's well worth just shaking it all out. That's a lovely spider there. Look, he's got a yellow abdomen.
So where do we want our floating island? over periods of time, the amount of weed, particularly the irises, become more and more matted and take up more and more of the space.
Okay, up we go.
That pond now is a very rich habitat, and it was incredible the number of frogs that emerged who were just hibernating down at the bottom. But what struck me was the range of different colours of the frogs. I hadn't appreciated just how many different colours that you could see. Some were almost reddish brown and others were bright yellow and green.
Lively, so they're much more lively. Frogs.
Yes, it's fairly yellow. Up we go.
They're pretty burly.
It was a joy to be there on that day, clearing out the pond, just to see the range of different colours of frogs. It was a real eye opener.
Oh, little baby one. Hey, you're a youngster. Here, dear. He's giving me the eye as well.
How many frogs we turned over?
Oh, dear. I think all this can just go in.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that.
Because there's going to be loads of little creatures in there. Yeah, I think you get across.
So it's had several goes.
So, okay.
One of the milestone big events. We're successful in securing some funding to enable us to purchase a new shed. One of the things that's happened over time is, as the orchard has grown, the amount of tools that we have has increased. Our apple juicing equipment has increased because the need for juicing of the apples has increased as the orchard has increased, and space has become very tight.
6 done out of 21.
A team of volunteers took on the construction of the shed. It was a bought-in shed, but the base was the first thing that had to be established. And if we're going to have something that's going to be durable and last a long time, then the base, as with the foundations of any building, are crucial. So a group of people went along and spent all of a Saturday digging holes, putting in concrete blocks, cementing them in, so that we were then able to create a platform on which the shed would be based. A platform which would allow the air to flow underneath, keeping it dry. Hopefully, we've got something which will last for a good number of years. Then a few weeks later, the shed itself arrived, and that was erected in a morning. You know, the joy of it coming prefabricated meant that it could be erected fairly quickly, and the most rewarding bit of that was the base and the shed. actually married up in terms of the sizes of them. So the guys who'd put the base together had got it spot on. So March is the first signs of the trees coming into bud. You start to see the flower buds forming, and you know all of a sudden spring is on its way. Keeping the grass short around the tree circles, because the grass will be starting to grow now, and pretty soon the town council will be coming in with their mower to do their first cuts. So we need to make sure the tree circles are in good condition. The trees to some extent are looking after themselves now. The other thing we need to do is the cordons. We laid cardboard down, that removes the light, and then over the cardboard we applied a mulch of a combination again, mainly spent hops this time, and some of our own compost. So that's providing a food. The nice thing about March, as I said earlier, it's the general signs of things starting to take off that really make March such a lovely time.
That's a lot of frogs. Every week.
You always keep that chart.
Spoon surfing.
Got some new bird boxes in that bag there. The first challenge is finding out where we're going to put them, because believe it or not, there aren't that many places. You'd think it would be easy to put up bird boxes. It's that time of year where docks are coming up, and the ground is still nice and wet. So there's a good chance if you get hold of them, you'll get quite a lot of it out, as opposed to it breaking when it's rock hard around it. So I'm afraid dock digging is on the agenda. A little bit of tidying around the pond. Do go down and have a look at the number of tadpoles that are in there. Yeah. If you want to do your walk on water act, this is the time to do it. You go across on the back of tadpoles. Compost making, there'll probably be a need for some turning from one bin to another. Grass cutting and feeding, and mulching the fruit trees. The pollinator bed was dug over completely last time, but there's a few bits starting to come up. We've got a big bed now, which we now need to fill with pollinators.
There's a few bees. There's plenty going out foraging, but at the moment they'll still be knotted up around the queen. But on a warm day they'll be flying. They'll be flying in another half an hour, I would think. I banged one of the legs with those cutting, and a few garbees came out and investigated us. then we went back in again.
They recognised you.
They must have done.
And then, last but by no means least, refreshments and good conversation at 11.
Yes, pull out.
Question 1. Who's identified a place for a bird box?
Primary issues to be addressed during this month, it's probably the increase in growth that's taking place, keeping on top of the grass and keeping the whole orchard looking neat and tidy. Having said that though, you're doing it in what is probably the most attractive time of the year in terms of the orchard, because it's blossom time, and the orchard is an absolute picture at this time of year. Because of the range of trees that are there, you get an extended period of blossom. As the early trees, such as the Beauty of Bath, they flower early, and then other trees will flower later. A bonus of that, of course, is if you get a late frost, then those trees which bloomed early and may have got caught by the frost, other trees which bloom slightly later don't get caught, so we're guaranteed to have apples because we've got a wide range of trees in there. Whereas more modern orchards, which tend to be single species ones, a late frost there can decimate the whole crop. So our mixed orchard has an advantage from that point of view. It is a place of real beauty and a joy to be in May, the orchard itself. But having said that, you can't just stand still and admire it. There is work to be done. Again, general tree maintenance, tidying up, scything, mowing, making sure the edge of the pond now can be clearly seen so that people don't fall into it as the grass tries to grow over the edge, etc., etc. Despite not having a lot of rain, the grass has been growing, and boy has it been growing. So a big job this month was cutting the grass and raking it off. The orchard itself is on land which is very fertile. Prior to being an orchard, there were horses kept on there, and so we are reaping the legacy of a lot of horse manure. So when we cut our grass, we do tend to rake it off. The other reason we rake it off is because mothers and children, particularly at this time of year, they'll come and have a picnic or just a run around after school. It's a much pleasanter place if the grass has all been raked off. Scythes and rakes are big tools which have always been awkward in terms of the way that they've been stored. And so one of the first things that we addressed in terms of the new shed was getting the scythes stored in a safe way. And so the patented scythe rack was installed, and the scythes are now successfully tucked away. And then the next challenge, of course, is to build the rack for the rakes.
Yeah, generally tidying up a bit to let the rain into these cordon trees, because they, it's a really intensive way of growing them. And if they're competing with all this long grass as well, it's not really good for them. They're planted so close together, and they're pruned in a very severe way to keep this shape, so each one comes up and bends over. That gives it more fruit than if it goes actually vertically. Bends over, and then you just develop a little framework of branches and spurs off each one cordon. and they're so close together. You know, it's a very artificial way of growing fruit trees.
The other thing that's this month, with all of the light, comes growth and blanket weed. So one of the things we needed to do was to clear the blanket weed. And one of the most effective ways that we've found of doing that is by using a bramble branch, which has got nice little barbs on it. We leave it on the side so that any little creatures which were caught up in that can find their way back into the pond.
The hive is referred to as a top bar hive, and the reason for that will become evident when I take the roof off. So if I do that now, the bees will form their comb on these bars. And the reason for me going in to have a look is to just check that the queen's in there, she's laying eggs, and there's larvae, which is evident. So there we have some comb that is just dripping with honey. That is incredibly healthy. All that capped honey, they've gone out and gathered and brought back. And that's all we have on there. And the next one in, I can see, is just the same. But the hive is so full, they have just kept producing more and more honey, that they're building comb now almost anywhere just to put some more stores in. As the bees will die off in September, and the hive will reduce in size, then I'll come and do a bit of tidying up of the comb. So at the moment they're really busy producing all of this which they want to use over winter, and they think even further ahead. So they're thinking, well, maybe next year won't be so good, because last year wasn't very good. And I guess the other issue facing bees is the amount of forage. I mean, I think here it's kind of bee heaven with the orchard and the allotments, and they'll fly a good distance. They'll fly up to 3 miles to go and find some food. But in the bigger picture, there isn't enough forage for bees. Now, on there, we have a very typical pattern. They're just beginning to build this out. I put an extra bar, an empty bar, in between two bits of the old comb, which they're now building out. They've got this lovely brood pattern here. I can see larvae here, not yet capped. And if I look closely, I'm sure I'll see some eggs. Yeah, some eggs at all stages down here. And then they've got some food which they're laying at the top. So when they feed these, they don't have very far to go. They don't have to come to the outskirts where they put their long-term stores. They've got short-term stores just above the brood. It's absolutely typical. Beautiful load of larvae just here, waiting to be capped. You can see the whole progression from eggs to small larvae to bigger larvae to capped cells. Absolutely wonderful.
Yellow rattle seed harvesting. Those of you who know what yellow rattle looks like, I believe it is ready for harvesting the seeds. I have brought some little bags for those of you who wish to go along and do that. And there's a little box there. So there's a combination of bags and boxes. The yellow rattle is in amongst the long grass.
It's got a very specific purpose. It's a grass parasite, so the roots of this plant attach to the grass roots and take some of its nutrients, and thereby shortening and thinning the grass out and promoting wildflower, because wildflowers are generally quite a bit shorter and more delicate than the rest. Hence why the area right here where it's prevalent is quite a bit different than the area just even behind you there. It was initially sown on purpose, and through subsequent management, scything, making sure the seed has time to drop.
Now I know you know your stuff.
Reasonably. So.
Why do you know your stuff? How come?
I mean, it's just you know, knowledge that's somewhat lost. I mean, there's part of it that's it's something that's very sort of antiquated. There's sort of a charm in that, I suppose, but also it's just understanding how these biological systems, why they work and how they work, and their interactions with the soil. I think understanding some of the sort of basic principles of the earth really connects you to it, and you gain much more profound respect for what surrounds you and what it really means to be, treading on this soil. What are you in this system? Because you're all part of it. You forget that people are animals too. We all have a very big impact, probably more than most other species, on what this planet does and is. So I think if we become a bit more aware of that, we could quickly undo a lot of the problems that we see in the world that we have ourselves caused. So it's a big circle somewhere.
And that sounds like a personal philosophy.
Yes,
that you've grown up
most
with.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a sort of permaculture-based philosophy.
We're working this way. This is the first one we've done on this side of this park. Anything up here, it's probably quite good if we don't. I went out to do the clear brambles and things like that, and just make sure that
So nice.
Oh yeah.
Just lovely.
Why are we picking unripe apples? Because if there are too many on the tree, it'll probably result in a smaller crop of smaller apples. If we give the tree less apples to deal with, it'll put all its energy into those fewer fruit and make a better crop and better quality apples.
Bit of a thankless task, this one.
What is it? What are you doing?
It's hogweed. I'm removing hogweed, which is a bit of a nuisance.
Given that this is kind of wild meadow, why is you taking out the hogweed?
Well, I think that the hogweed tends to be a bit invasive, I think. But there is rather a lot of it here.
Yeah.
Pernicious things like docks, couch grass, dandelion roots, anything which under normal composting circumstances is likely to regenerate, we put into a drowning bin. So simply a dustbin, fill it with water, and 12 months later it will have rotted down to such a state that it won't regenerate when we put it back onto the soil as compost. At this time of year though, we have an awful lot of, as you can see, dry material because it's been extremely hot, and so we're using the drowning bin material to add moisture and also to help accelerate the composting process. So we're operating a 5-bin composting system, and essentially we start from the outside edge. So fresh material goes into the 2 outside bins. That's any green material and brown material, the apples from the thinning, etc., etc., into that bin first. Composting needs air and moisture in order to create the process and really get it working efficiently. And what we're hoping to achieve is a hot composting where we kill anything that's in there and end up with a lovely fibrous material. So after a few weeks, possibly a month, we turn the 2 outside bins into the next 2 bins, and by that time you'll probably find it's about half the height. It will have composted down to that. You can then start filling the 2 outside bins with new material, and at the same time, the following month, you would turn the 2 middle bins into the centre bin for the final part of the process. And out of this bin, ultimately, comes wonderful material like this, which is beautifully composted down, ideal for mulching, adding to the soil, and improving the structure of the soil, as well as providing nutrients. If you're a siver, Nick is going to be sending an email out this week, and I think Thursday morning
is scything morning, probably from 6:30, before it gets too hot, and that's when the bulk, or hopefully the bulk of the wildflower area will be scythed down.
I have to lift my glass up. Desperate measures. These make tractors on very tall wheels. Yeah. And they're tall enough so that the centre of the tractor.
When the season starts, it's weekly meetings, which is usually about the end of March. I then come along every week with a list of tasks and get people to do them if they want to, which they do usually. They're very good. We usually run weekly from end of March till about beginning of October, and then during the winter months we just meet once a month just to keep things tidy and ticking over. We are providing a space where people can learn to grow vegetables, learn to grow their own food, and also we work as much as we can on organic principles. It's also a gathering place, so somewhere where people can meet and talk about, just have a chat and a natter and things like that. And also it's a valuable asset for people who don't have their own gardens. Everything in the flatbeds that I've done the planting plan for, we all share amongst ourselves. So as and when it's ready, we harvest it and then people take it. We make jam and things and we sell them at the Apple Day, or we also have an allotment open day, which is in August. It coincides with National Allotment Week, and all we do is put out the orchard's gazebo just outside the gate, wheel the table out, and we have a pop-up cafe. For all our volunteers, I badger them into making things. So we have a marvellous array of cakes and biscuits and things, and a lot of the stuff is made from the produce that we grow here. People come along and we don't sell it, we ask for donations so they can have a cup of tea and a cake, and we usually make a fair bit. People are very generous in Bridport.
In this site there are just over 60 different trees, and of those there are 40 different apple varieties, but there are also greengages, plum, pear, mulberry, quince. The picking for us begins in August usually with the very early varieties, the Beauty of Bath, Exeter Cross, George Cave and Discovery. They're all early apples. When you're working in a project like this, you probably take more care to do a bit more research than you would perhaps just in your own garden, because you want to do everything you can not to make mistakes, and you want what you're guiding people towards to be accurate.
Yeah, beautiful morning, perfect for juicing, bit of shade as well for us.
And eating apples, so that the flavour doesn't change too dramatically through different bottles. The main point of mixing the apples is that we have quite a few cider apple varieties in the orchard. They have a much more astringent flavour than eating apples or cooking apples. So you wouldn't want to find that some batches of the juice had a much higher proportion of cider apples than others. You want to go for a reasonably standardised product. We could do single variety juices, but with 40 varieties it would be impossible to manage, and also no one tree would give us a big enough crop really to make that feasible.
Cheers. Oh, lovely.
Really nice, very happy.
Yes. No, it's good. It's just got that.
It's nice. Yeah,
at the end.
nice.
It's lovely.
Cheers.
And then moving on towards Apple Day, there's a few other things that we need to be working on. One is, well, it is next Saturday, and if you're not coming and if you haven't told me what you're doing on the day, please tell me during the morning.
The biggest achievement for this community orchard has probably been Apple Day itself, and each year it's very slightly bigger, very slightly more extravagant, and attracting very slightly more visitors as well. Apple Day is a celebration of the apple. There's a collective of apple growers set up in 1990, and then groups all around the country followed suit. The purpose of that Apple Day was twofold. One of them is it was going to be a celebration for local communities countrywide, but the other one was to raise awareness of lots of rare varieties of apples, and there are many hundreds, which could be lost if we're not careful, if we don't maintain our orchards in a very diverse manner. And our Apple Day here serves two purposes as well. Apart from being a most enjoyable event for lots of people, and on the last Apple Day we had about 500 people coming along in total, but also it's our main fundraiser because this orchard is largely self-funded, so all of the money that we get is ploughed back into making sure this orchard is maintained into a local amenity that's enjoyed by the local community, not only in Bridport but further afield as well, because all visitors that come here say how much they like our community orchard and our town.
There are still a few apples on the trees, so they will need picking. A health and safety reminder, you've all arrived healthy. I'd like you to all go back healthy. So if picking today, for example, you're going to be going up ladders and things like that, so when in doubt, do nout, be healthy and be safe. I think, again, on Apple Day, when lots of people are here, if the tree labels are legible, then if people want to look and see what type of tree it is, it makes it that much easier.
There we are, he's got his name back, Tom Putt.
The most important aspect of Apple Day is the apple, and so our centre of attraction is the juicing of lots of apples, some of which are from our own orchard here. We juice the apples on the day, and then sell that apple juice fresh there and then.
To bring on the goddess of appley love. So come on, everybody, let's coo like a dove.
I travelled the seas in my pretty Dutch corset, and now made my home here in bonny West Dorset. I planted this orchard with girt loads of trees and different apples, the locals.
Make room for the fairy horse. He's topsy and turvy and all over the course. Hold your horses there, Granny. There's a rotten apple in this skin, so nice, but it's cornered so malicious. Don't pay the price for French Gordon delicious.
My evil plan worked properly. No more spells diversity. Just my awful apple monopoly.
My orchard was under attack. But here are them apples, all picked, packed, and stacked. Long live all varieties, that's what I say. May this occasion be our Apple Day!
And so our tale ends with joy and laughter, and needless to say, Belle, well, she lived happily ever after. And so on this Apple Day and every future Apple Day, I say we should remember the roots and the fruits of the orchard. And hey, we got a little song to help you with the names of all the apples.
Slack my girdles, golden ball, it's a hoary morning and a buttery dawn. Slack my girdles, golden ball, it's a hoary morning and a buttery dawn. These are all the names of the apples in the orchard, planted by others for you and for you. And read these to know the names of.
This orchard is entirely managed and maintained by volunteers. I'll say entirely. Some of the infrastructure is maintained by our town council and they do a brilliant job on that. But we have volunteers that do just about everything else. So we always like to have people not only enjoying the orchard, but if they feel so inclined to get involved in the maintenance of it, and maybe get involved in helping maintain and set up Apple Day itself as well.
Slack my girdles, golden ball, it's a hoary morning and a buttery dawn. Slack my girdles, golden ball, it's a hoary morning and a buttery dawn. These are all the names of the apples in the orchard.